Well, hi again. Today is January 29th, 2018, so it's the third week of the legislative session. So today there's several different things in the newsletter, but I want to spend this time with the video talking to you about healthcare costs in Alaska. You know, I think a lot of us have been to various meetings on the subject of healthcare costs, and people look around at each other and they go, I don't know why it's so high, but it just is. And some people say, oh, it's those nurses. They charge so much for their services. Well, I'm here to tell you, no, it's not the nurses. In fact, it is a rule that we have in state government that actually is escalating those costs. And it's a rule called the 80th percentile. Now, you'll see now on the screen a slide that shows you a lineup of 20 people. And if you were in that lineup and you were the fourth tallest person out of those 20 people, you would represent the 80th percentile of height in those 20 people. And the value for that 80th percentile would be however tall you were. Let's say you were 6 feet tall. So the statement could be made, the 80th percentile of height of these 20 people is 6 feet. So, I know this is a complex math problem, but stick with me. The 80th percentile sets the minimum payment that insurance companies have to make on services, healthcare services. So you go to the doctor, you have a healthcare insurer, and the doctor submits that bill to your insurance, and the insurance has to pay at the 80th percentile, so up there at the very top of the costs compared to other providers in that community, wherever you're living. And in Anchorage, of course, we have a lot of providers. It was originally put into place in 2004, so that would have been under the Murkowski governorship. And it had two intentions, and they were very good intentions. The first one was to make insurance companies pay most of the bill. So, setting the floor or the minimum payment that insurance companies had to make very high accomplished that. And the second reason for it is to lure more doctors to come to Alaska. I don't know how long you've been here, but I was born here before statehood. I remember when we became a state, and I remember we had very few doctors in our state. We had very few people as well. And in those days, everyone, if you had a major surgical need that was pretty complicated, heart surgery, for example, you had to go outside. So these intentions were all well and good, and they have worked. Today, we have more specialists in Alaska, in Anchorage particularly, than most other cities of a comparable size. We have hospitals that are monstrous in size. I know that in Anchorage, you can think of one in particular that continues to grow in the number of buildings that it has and the amount of geography that it owns. So it has worked. The problem is it's also worked on a downside. The cost of healthcare has gone up. A logical person, a logical business person would say, well, if I get the 80th percentile of the charges in this geographic area, if I eke up my charges just a little bit each year, and of course, other specialists in my group, you know, there's just a few of us, so we'll kind of set the prices and keep eking it up, we will be reimbursed more and more. And that's what we've seen. The cost of healthcare has escalated faster in Alaska than, again, comparable areas in the lower 48. And it has affected our insurance premiums. Remember, insurance companies are taking a risk. They're insuring you and saying, we're going to be able to cover you because you're pretty healthy, right? And you're probably not going to go to the doctor much. So you get a pretty low premium versus somebody that has lots of history of health issues and so forth. Well, what's happened is, as the prices in Alaska have gone up, all of us have been swept up. in a risk pool that has increased our insurance premiums. We are now down to one company that insures individuals in Alaska. We used to have 4 or 5. We're down to one because the costs here are just so high. So and in fact here's another fact you might be interested in. Our insurance costs, our premiums, are 2 times what they are in similar cities in the lower 48. So this is all well and good to identify the problem. In fact, people all over the state have identified this problem for a number of years. In fact, the Healthcare Commission, in its reports in 2010, 11, 12, all the way up to 2015, identified the 80th percentile as a huge problem. School districts have to insure those teachers and janitors, etc. Maybe you just saw the negotiated settlement between the Anchorage School District and the Teachers Union, and those premiums now are more than $1,600 per month per teacher. Just the teacher. I've talked to people who are paying $2,000 a month with a $11,000 deductible for insurance. It's out of control. The cost of health care is killing family budgets. It's crippling business budgets who want to provide health care coverage for their employees, but they just can't afford it. And school districts who want to hire more teachers are instead having to spend that money on insurance premiums for teachers. So, the solution. I am proposing a solution this session and a piece of legislation that will move this minimum of 80th percentile down lower. So what does that mean? It means that instead of requiring insurance companies to pay at the 80th percentile, I'm proposing that they begin to negotiate at a much lower floor. This is the starting point for a negotiation with an insurance company and a doctor. I'm suggesting we move this down from the 80th percentile down much lower so that there's actually more negotiating strength on both sides to say, you know, I'm a specialist and I should get a very high payment, and negotiate then with the insurance company to get that, justify it. So that's what I'm proposing this session. There are many organizations, businesses who are standing with me on this, and so you'll probably be hearing more about it. The obvious opponents are the doctors that you and I both respect highly, and we are thankful that they're here. We don't have to go outside to the lower 48 for a lot of complicated surgical procedures, but we just can't afford the prices any longer. And so the intent of my bill is to ratchet these things down so that there's more negotiation allowed between an insurance company and a doctor in terms of what they're going to charge and be reimbursed for. So keep watching. I just wanted to talk with you just a little bit about this particular topic. It's not going to be fleshed out a lot in the newsletter, but hopefully this has enlightened you a little bit. So thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.